Jamaica. Make we do the right thing. Make we live good today for a better tomorrow. Talk it out. Don't fight it out. The time by the Ministry of National Security is
6:30.
Lead story today on CVM TV. The Energy Minister, Beryl, held court at a press conference earlier on this Wednesday where he made some startling revelations, including this one. The Jamaica Public Service Company, according to his words, may not have passed on the full benefit of the break it got on the special consumption tax from the government when it was putting together the light bills for the July to August cycle. You'll hear the numbers involved as well as hear the best bits from the minister's conversation with journalists earlier on this Wednesday. This JPS issue just going deeper and deeper by the day. And I know you want to hear about it because you just want to know how come you've been asked to shell out so much for your light bills for this most recent cycle. So let's crack on with lead story on CVM TV today. Welcome to a lead story here on CVM TV on this Wednesday. The Energy Minister, Beryl, again in the center of the firing line. Well, the JPS is in the center of the firing line, and the minister has trained his weapon on the JPS. Another press conference today to deal with concerns about the recent light bills sent by the JPS. And not just that, the fact of the post-burial restoration efforts of the Light and Power Company. He also spoke about the role that the Office of Utilities Regulation has played in holding JPS to account for what many believe to be infractions and missteps in this post-Hurricane Beryl period. The minister, of course, he came armed with data. Did I say Beryl? He's the Minister of Energy? Well, that goes without saying. But he came with data which he says proves the authenticity of the claims he's making. We're talking about letters exchanged between the JPS and the Ministry of Finance. And the Minister Vaz, he started today's press conference by speaking to the matter concerning the high electricity bills that people are seeing post-Beryls. And he referred to a letter from the JPS to the Finance Minister, Dr. Nigel Clark, trying to put a rationale on paper for the hike in the light bills.
For thousands, if not tens of thousands of customers who received their bills recently. Following the many legitimate concerns raised by Jamaicans across all 14 parishes regarding estimated and actual bills received from JPS for the July-August billing period, the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Science, Energy and Telecommunications and Technology and Transport and I decided it was imperative that we host this press conference to have some matters properly aired and presented to the wider public in the interest of transparency and accountability. First, I wish to address some statements being made in the public regarding these bills and the reasons for the bills, the communications with the government, and the facts surrounding both. On Monday, the 19th of August, 2024, Ms. Winsome Callum, JPS Director of Corporate Communications, stated during an interview nationwide that the Jamaica Public Service advised key stakeholders that there would be an increase in the bills for customers. I have done my own research and I have spoken to many, and I am of the opinion that Ms. Winsome Callum did not intentionally give information that was not accurate or anything untoward. I therefore take it as it is, and we will put that matter to rest. My position is that it was unintentional. A letter was sent to JPS, from JPS to the Ministry of Finance dated July 1st, 2024, regarding 3 facilities: the South Jamaica Power Company, the JPS Bogue 114 megawatt combined cycle power plant in Montego Bay, and the New Fortress Energy Jamalco power plant. Please note that this letter was not sent to the OUR, neither was it sent to the Permanent Secretary of the Energy Ministry, nor to me as Minister with responsibility for energy. So I'd like to make that categorically clear, to clear the air and the confusion that the Ministry, the OUR, the Permanent Secretary and the Minister was not aware of the letter that was sent. It was neither copied to us, it was a straight letter to the Ministry of Finance, which I do find in itself odd.
So gaps in the paper trail and in the process of communication there, the minister saying that his ministry and the regulator not in the loop as JPS sought to get the necessary waivers to import and to use the alternative diesel oil to fuel part of the generation process during that disruption caused by Hurricane Beryl. We'll have much more from the minister's press conference and some perspective shaping after this break.
Concharo Coco.
It's the girl Naya Nayela. I'm representing from Concharo Coco Beauty and Aesthetics. You're watching Cooking with Love. Yeah.
What them know about that?
Keep it locked to CVM TV.
Celine, what going? You can't say we're a friend now, Celine. We have to take on the road.
Yeah, man, we have to take out the same way. All right, Lord, thank you so much for this day.
Me, I do the work. Yeah. And the people them accept it. Clarendon, Mandeville. But now we get to go into the inner city of Kingston.
I can't wait to learn more as we go across Jamaica into different churches to understand what they do.
Welcome back to a lead story here. So here's the thing. I'm going to have to lift a lot more than I envisaged. So here's the thing. Again, one of the contentions around this issue is the JPS initiated communication with the Ministry of Finance to get a reduction or waiver of the special consumption tax applied to alternative diesel oil, ADO, which it was preparing to use to generate electricity, given that LNG, which it usually uses to generate electricity, would not be available in the immediate period before Beryl and immediately after Beryl, because the supplier of LNG, New Fortress Energy, had to dismantle its installations for the incoming storm. So because of that, JPS made the preemptive move to write to the Finance Ministry to say, listen, either you waive or reduce the SCT so we can import this very much more expensive alternative diesel oil, of course, when you compare it to LNG, so that we can do electricity generation. This letter was not sent to the Energy Ministry. It was not sent to the OUR, is what the minister is saying. It was sent straight to the Ministry of Finance. VAS, at today's press conference, went into that chain of events, to talk about how the JPS came to use this ADO rather than the LNG, and how that contributed to the issue of the high light bills which people are now grappling with. Let's hear this piece from the minister.
The LNG versus ADO. The letter stated that these plants would have been affected by the relocation of the New Fortress Energy's floating storage and regasification unit ahead of the passage of Beryl. The relocation to avoid the storm damage, the FSRU was decommissioned on July 1st, 2024 at approximately 1 p.m. Following checks made by the ministry, the FSRU was recommissioned on July 6, 2024 at 9 p.m. So if we take it as 5 days. Very important information. Using this information, this means that the the South Jamaica Power Company would have had access to LNG as of this July 6, 2024. The same for the NFE Jamalco Power Plant, which JPS stated in their letter was unable to switch to ADO and therefore was unable to supply energy until the FSRU was back in operation. The July 1st letter also stated that the JPS bulk power plant in Montego Bay had 5 days of stored LNG at the plant and would need to switch to ADO upon exhausting the stored fuel. Again, bear in mind that FSRU was out of use for 5 days at best. The only plant that would have used ADO would have been the South Jamaica Power Company for a period of 5 days at a worst case.
Very interesting there. So let me see if I can zero in on a couple of things. One, well, in case you're wondering what an FSRU is, it simply means floating storage and regasification unit. So that's the physical barge, if you want to call it, that the LNG comes from. So that was taken offline because of the pending arrival of Hurricane Beryl. That's one. Two, the letters exchanged between the JPS and the Finance Ministry, a reasonable person would come away after reading that letter thinking that JPS wanted to use the alternative diesel oil, which is more expensive and which it requested either a waiver of the SCT on or a reduction of the SCT. It wanted that because there was no source of LNG other than from the floating storage and regasification unit, the FSRU. So it wanted the ministry to allow them to import this alternative diesel oil. Vaz said today at the press conference that actually the Bogue plant in Manchester had, in Montego Bay, had 5 days of LNG in storage. So the JPS, even as New Fortress took their facility offline, the FSRU, could have leaned on the Bogue unit for LNG in this period rather than have to turn to the alternative diesel oil. That's I can't think of a better interpretation of that. That's two. The other thing is this. If it is that the JPS wrote to the finance minister saying, look, give us access to alternative diesel oil at this lower SCT, why is it then that the Ministry of Finance was put in the position of believing that alternative diesel oil was the only game in town, that no other fuel existed, and the JPS had to get this and get it at a significantly reduced SCT, or else they wouldn't be able to meet their power generation obligations? That's also a question for the JPS to answer. And there's another point there concerning what the JPS said to the public. The JPS said, look, we used this alternative diesel oil in calculating your electricity bills. An electricity bill is sent on a 30-day usage cycle. The JPS here on this program and elsewhere said the alternative diesel oil was used for 7 days in that 30-day cycle. Vaz is saying something is wrong with that because the floating gasification and floating storage and regasification unit was only out for 5 days. So where the other 2 days come from? The JPS said we used alternative diesel oil for 7 days because the LNG thing was down. Minister Vaz is telling us, well, the LNG thing was only down for 5 days. So how is it that the JPS said we used alternative diesel for 7 days? These are questions the company needs to answer. Yeah? We'll pick up with Minister Vaz after this break.
Charo Coco.
It's the girl Naya Nayela. I'm representing for Concharo Cocoa Beauty and Aesthetics. You're watching Cooking with Love. Yeah.
What them know about that?
Keep it locked to CVM TV.
the internationally acclaimed On Stage with Winford Williams.
At a new time, Saturdays at 8 p.m. on CVM TV.
So much more than entertainment.
The time by Grace. Taste that moves you is
6:45.
It's fair to say that the whole post-Beryl phase of the JPS's operations has been a public relations disaster. The company has not done well by its customers where the pace of the restoration of power is concerned, and it certainly has crossed the infraction threshold by virtue of the size of the bills that many people are getting for this July to August cycle. Exorbitant in many respects, the JPS says rather, it's because of the higher fuel charge, and the Energy Minister is finding several holes in the JPS line of communication to the public, and also realizing that there are huge gaps in the JPS's own communication to the key stakeholders that should have been told that an increase was imminent. Well, the Office of Utilities Regulation didn't escape the wrath of the minister. He challenged the OUR. The OUR, of course, is the body empowered to regulate all utility companies in Jamaica. He said that, look, they were not proactive in regulating JPS and exerting superintendence and oversight of the JPS's billing practices.
Move to the billing exchange rate. The billing exchange rate moved from 0.8% or $1.23 between July and August 2024. Month over month, this is not the largest increase for the April to August period. In May 2024, the billing exchange rate jumped from $2.23 or 14%. In other words, the month-to-month impact of the exchange rate is not as severe as JPS is attempting to have customers believe, and therefore will not have such a dramatic impact on their current bills when compared to their previous bills.
So the issue of what are the factors in a light bill that cause the final price to spike. Minister Vaz neutralizing the argument about exchange rate influence on the light bill, saying the movement in the exchange rate, the depreciation in the Jamaican dollar relative to the US dollar was almost negligible, less than 1%. So it could not have contributed to a spike in the light bills that many customers saw. The issue of the fuel charge is the central and most important issue, because he also went on to speak further about the methodology used by the JPS to arrive at the bills that customers got for the July to August cycle.
It raised concerns for me as minister as to why the OUR did not investigate the cause for such an anomaly in the fuel rate provided by JPS, bearing in mind that no information has been provided to suggest that JPS had to operate using ADO for fuel for a prolonged period of time, given that the supply was disrupted for 5 days, and that based on communications from JPS, only one plant would have been utilizing ADO for the period of disruption. These are questions that must be addressed and factors that raise great concern for me as minister and for the government and, of course, all well-thinking Jamaicans regarding the billing practices of the JPS and the level of oversight being provided by OUR to protect customers.
Again, I want you to understand what is happening here. JPS's power generation is fueled under normal circumstances by liquefied natural gas, LNG, which is cheaper than most of the other sources of fuel used to generate electricity on the market. Alternative diesel oil, ADO, is very expensive compared to LNG. Because of that, and because the government wants to use a cleaner and, of course, a cheaper source of energy, so that the bills that you and I pay can be cheaper. If the source of energy is cheaper, then the final bill must be cheaper relative to something else. They placed an almost prohibitive special consumption tax on alternative diesel oil to dissuade the JPS from using that. The JPS said in this emergency Beryl situation, it had to lean on ADO, and so it asked the Ministry of Finance to either waive the SCT or reduce it. The ministry did, reduced it from $44, you've heard this several times before, from $44 to $4 and change per litre. That was a 91% decrease in what the JPS would usually pay for SCT on the importation of alternative diesel oil. The facts are, those savings don't appear to have been passed on to the consumer. Rather, after getting a 91% break on the tax paid on alternative diesel oil, using the same alternative diesel oil in the power generation process, the JPS went on and raised light bills by between 30 and in excess of 100%. That's the problem Jamaicans have today, trying to reconcile the numbers. It emerged today that when the JPS sent those calculations and to say, well, this is how we're going to calculate the bills for this cycle, the Office of Utilities Regulation raised no objection. No, that has to be called into question to say, well, did the OUR approve this methodology, approve the figures used, despite the obvious distortionary impact it would have on the final bills paid by customers? That's the central issue, and there are so many questions for the OUR to answer, and I don't know how many more days the OUR needs to hunker down to fashion questions of a kind, fashion answers rather of a kind, to answer the many questions. Were you asleep at the wheel? How could you approve a pricing and a bill calculation methodology that ultimately has stiffed Jamaicans right across the customer range in the under the JPS banner? That is one of the most important questions for the OUR today. So the minister, you've heard him before, speak about the legislative changes that are coming for the Office of Utilities Regulation and for the JPS itself. Remember, the JPS's license expires in 2027. So that is something that will be taken into account, the performance of the JPS in this period. And as far as the regulatory framework of the JPS is concerned, the minister says, look, there will have to be serious thought given to what goes into the new license that the JPS will receive, given its monopoly position on the generation, the transmission of electricity in Jamaica. Yeah? The fact of the matter is, and maybe I'll have to do an extended version of George's take here, because where we are, we're not in a good place. The figures, some of the information provided by the Energy Ministry today suggests that the amount by which light bills should perhaps have been increased, yes, is about 6%. It's about 6%. When you account for the inclusion of the more expensive alternative diesel oil for a portion of the 30-day billing cycle that determines how much you pay for your electricity bills, he's saying that Petrojam's calculations show that you should have had a 6% increase in light bills. What you instead got from the JPS were increases of at least 30% and as much as 100+% in the light bills. The JPS and the OUR each need to be made to answer how come. How come savings received from the importation of the alternative diesel oil were not passed over to the consumer? Simple questions, the answers are needed now.
Wagwan.
Charo Coco.
It's the girl Naya Nayela. I'm representing for Concharo Coco Beauty and Aesthetics. You're watching Cooking with Love. Yeah.
What them know about that?
Keep it locked to CVM TV.
What's your story? What's your sign? You're dreamers. Don't care what other people say. We're doing this in our own way. We come alive. We come alive. We come alive. We're doing this in our own way. We come alive.
The internationally acclaimed On Stage with Winfred Williams.
At a new time, Saturdays at 8 p.m. on CVM TV.
So much more than entertainment.
Look who we have in the cut. No, today episode I got nice. Legends, Senator, my longtime brethren, the great, all-star, the king, and the man himself. Salute! You know, as man, we're not to go as specialists, and that's the pinnacle of the problem. We want some new